Hi, it's Colleen and welcome back to my channel. The project I'm going to bring to you today is something I've been working on for over a year. I started scaling up a pattern from Patterns of Fashion book 6 and life got in the way. That was last summer and now it's September. So I finally got back in the sewing room. I finished this project and I want to show you the process. The outfit that I am copying came from page 140 on Patterns of Fashion book 6. It is a red worsted wool jacket and skirt. Basically, it's a double-breasted jacket. It's got a statement collar, some really nice lapels, and a skirted bottom that has really nice pleating at the back. And the petticoat is a little unique in that it has box pleats instead of knife pleats. So I'm excited to try my hand at making this. I got as far as scaling up the pattern itself from the grid that is on the next page. So if you're not familiar with Patterns of Fashion, Janet Arnold actually examined these extant garments in great detail, minute detail, and she drew the pattern of the garment as it is in the museum on a grid. So every square is 1 inch, you draw it out full size on a piece of paper, and that is the finished size of the garment as it exists in the museum. That means it's the size of the garment that the person actually wore back in 1780 to 1785, which is where this outfit comes from. There are not multiple sizes included. So if you are not the size of the person who wore that garment, this pattern will not fit you. Once you scale it up, you then have to look at how to scale it up again to fit your size. And I say scale up because that's what I needed to do. I needed to make it larger. Some people may need to scale down and make it smaller. Then you go through the process of making a mock-up, just like any other project, and you figure out where your size adjustments worked, where they didn't, and what you need to adjust in that area. Plus, it helps you understand how the pieces fit together. Because the other thing that this does not give you, besides multiple sizes, is instructions for sewing. When I say I am running on pure instinct, I am. You have to learn how to put those pieces together. It's like a puzzle without a picture, although in this case you do have a picture to follow, but there's no instructions that tell you sew this seam first, sew that seam last. You have to figure it out as you go. It was a fascinating process for me. I ended up with a really nice fitting garment, and I'm excited to wear it at the end of this video and show you how it came together. So come along with me and take a look at the process that I've gone through to make this project. These are the two wools that I have shown in other videos, and I made a happy discovery. So I thought that this was the fabric right here, but once I get my finger in there, it's two. So it's not as thick as I thought. That'll make a really nice petticoat. There's enough of this to do that, and there's enough of that, I think, to make the jacket. If not, I have this gray wool, so I will definitely have black for the skirt, and then I'll have either gray or burgundy for the top. I think the bust is going to be about 5 inches too small, and the waist is going to be about 2 inches too small. So I am going to have to grade this up for my measurements. Yeah, it's going to be too small, but I can fix it. Here's the first bit of this jacket, and you can see it's pretty darn close to what it needs to be in the end. I thought that I would have a lot more work to do at this point, and I'm pleasantly surprised at how well this is fitting at the moment. It does need a lot more to overlap like a double-breasted jacket with buttons. I did not extend this line right here when I first scaled it up, so it'll be pretty easy to add it on now. You can see I've added the skirt, and it's pretty good. Right in through here. I have not added the sleeves, so I still have the seam allowance here, but the skirt lays pretty nicely, and I will have a bum pad, so it'll make this flip out just a little bit more. But we are missing a piece. It's not in Patterns of Fashion, and I've made it exactly the way it is, and you can see that the center back doesn't have really a very deep pleat in it. And right here at the bottom is supposed to have sort of an inverted box pleat with maybe 2 inches at the top, because I can tell from looking at the way it's folding there should be a pretty good chunk of fabric there. The more I study the pattern in the page, I think they forgot to draft that piece. So I will figure out how to get that piece in there. The second thing is, you can see there is some additional fabric right here. When they drew it in the book, this seam line here does not match up from this piece to the back piece. It's not the same length in the book. There was no way to put this together without adding in this much right here. And then the skirt lengths are not the same length either. So this skirt piece comes around, and where it's supposed to connect to the back, the pattern as drawn in the book is not the same length. The seams don't match up. So I had to extend it, and it still isn't quite right. This should be, instead of being longer here in the middle, it should be more like straight across. So I'll come back in a few minutes when I have more of a working mock-up. But this is not too bad for the amount of work I've done so far. This is the real me. I'm in my pajama pants. I haven't done my hair. I don't have makeup. But I am working in my sewing room today, and I did make all of the changes that I noted in the last clip. A lot of things worked and some things didn't. I did add in that extra little bit here in the back, and that actually worked really well. So, you know, it's hard in this lightweight cotton for it to lay like it should, but essentially, you know, we've got this extra bit right in the middle, and that is giving it the fullness that the picture shows. The size is pretty good, but it seems like every time I'm doing one of these projects, I just have to keep fiddling and fiddling with the shoulder strap. So here I am taking out another really big chunk because I am short-waisted. So from here to my shoulders, I'm actually a petite, even though I'm not a petite from the waist down. I have made that adjustment here, and once this is pulled up where it needs to be, all of these other wrinkles resolve. This is going to lay really nicely right in through here. I've got my lapels here, and in the book it indicated that it did fold left over right, so I have it pinned in place. My sleeve is wonky. It is actually on an angle here, and I don't know how come that happened, but it did. So I need to add about 1.25 inches to this inside seam here. That's an easy fix. What's not an easy fix is the way this sleeve is fitting in here. The other thing is, you see it's got this seam under here, right? And it looks fine when it's bent, but when you put your arm down, it makes a little bubble. So I'm assuming it's because maybe it's not tight enough, but if I make it too tight, then it restricts your motion. So I don't know, I don't like this weird little bubble right here. Oh, and one other thing, I did cut this in a little bit because this was wrinkling. When everything is pulled and pinned the way it needs to be to lay flat, the skirting was kind of giving me some weird wrinkles. So I did cut in just a little bit, and you can see it wants to open up right there. So I'm gonna add that to the pattern. I think what I'm gonna do is make the body and the lining in the final wool and linen and get all of this part done. And then I can fiddle with the sleeves, maybe do another mock-up of the sleeve before I cut it out in wool. Anyway, it's looking good. I mean, I look terrible. It's looking good. I decided I should mock up this collar before I start cutting into the wool. And obviously this is just cotton, so it's not going to lay the same as the wool will. The original pattern piece looked like it was going to sew in there just really well, but I couldn't get it to lay right. And what I realized is that it needs not along the seam line, but along the outside edge. It just needs a little more distance in order for that to lay nicely. So whenever you're running into a problem where the fabric seems to be buckling or puckering or something like that, try slicing into it like I did here, and you'll see that it lays where it wants to lay. This now lays a lot better along the back, so that wedge in there made all the difference. I need to be thinking about my lining, and as you can see here, the original has different types of linen inside. So there's one color up here pieced in, there's one color there, and a different color here. This is not a design choice, this is just what they had available. So I am going to use what I have available, which means I'm using this green colored linen here. And then I don't normally save scraps, but I'm kind of glad I did because I have these scraps of black linen here. And I'll do the skirting with black so that if it does show, it's sort of coordinating with the gray. An important thing to remember on this is that you have to line this piece too. And if I'm going to use black on the bottom of the skirting, I will then use black for this portion here. It's always scary cutting into your fabric because you know once you cut into it, you can't uncut it. I tend to get my fabric from places like thrift stores or, you know, discount stores or something where what you have is what you have. It's not like I can go back to the store and get more. I don't always know exactly the fiber content of what I'm using. That's okay. I like to save money on my sewing, and sometimes that means getting really creative with how you do it. Especially, you know, when you think about a nice wool, it's expensive, right? To go and buy brand new fabric. Even if you get it on sale, it can still be really pricey. That's why when I can find it for $1 or $2 a yard, if that, then, you know, I feel a lot better about my hobby. I'm kind of a practical person. And I want to make pretty things, but I also don't want to spend a ton of money for it. At least while I'm learning. Maybe someday I'll splurge and get the big fancy silk or something that's $20 a yard or $40 a yard or more. But that day is not here yet, especially when I'm trying to make something without instructions, without proper pattern pieces. I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. I've been spending some time puzzling through the order of operations because I want to make sure all of my seams get enclosed and that everything is nice and neat on the inside. So I'm going to sew these and sew these by machine. I'm going to sew the bodice together by machine, and then I'm going to insert the lining along the skirt by hand, I think. And then I'm going to sew the lining of the bodice together by machine and then stitch it in by hand. By the way, I had to make a list for myself because otherwise I think I would forget. I finished sewing this gray wool outer stuff and I have pressed it. Obviously in the 18th century these were all sewn by hand, but it appears from the book that this would have been turned in, you know, by the seam allowance and pressed. This would have been turned in and then it's sort of felled into place just like this right here. I can't do that much hand sewing, so my concession to my physical limitations is to stitch right sides together, stitch along here, and I will then turn it and you'll see it'll be a nice neat finish along the bottom edge. I left a little bit of the gray showing on the inside so that the black doesn't show on the outside. I want the black to be visible when you have a pleat, you know, maybe like this, but I don't want it to show otherwise. The bodice lining has been sewn in by machine on these long edges and then turned. And then I had to do a lot of fiddling to get that pinned in here. And eventually what I did was I basted in this black lining, and then that way I could just fold this over, pin it, and I will hand stitch it. You do end up putting in like a piece of whatever color you want here. It could be the same fabric or it could be contrasting fabric. So it will not look like this. I'll put either gray or black wool on this little fold down part. I haven't decided which way to go yet. On the original, the collar was not lined. The edge was just turned in a tiny rolled hem and finished that way. I'm going to line mine because I am not very good at those little tiny rolled hems anyway. And I think I need the extra body that will come from having this lined. I'm going to machine stitch it from this point up and around on both sides. And then that'll leave this bottom edge free for me to attach it to the jacket. You do end up stitching it in with the lining facing the right side of the bodice fabric, and you only sew through the bodice fabric and the lining. And then you clip the curves of that seam and press it up into the collar. Then you lay down the outside of the collar flat, and you can see I've used some orange thread to baste it into place right along through here. And then now I had to clip the curve around the neck of the lining, and that will allow me to fold it in and make a nice finished edge like this. Now that I've finished the bodice, I am really rethinking the sleeves. It is too big up here around the arm side. And I just quickly measured the bodice, and it's about 17 and a half, 17 and 3/4 inches for the arm opening or the sleeve opening. This is right at 17. When I scaled it up, I was expecting the whole bodice to be a little bit bigger. And so this is like 20. And it's just too much fabric to have it fit in there nicely. So I need to revert back to the original arm side and maybe just extend this a little bit to make sure I have enough seam allowance to make an adjustment on the fly. The other thing that wasn't working, and I pointed it out in the last clip on the sleeves, is that this is not working here. And when I scaled up the sleeves for a bigger arm, I think I messed up where this elbow seam is. I am going to go back to this original sleeve as drawn because I did take up the shoulder straps by a full 2 inches at the top. This original top should work. I think I still am going to need to lengthen the sleeves and make some adjustments down at the cuff side of things, but the top is not going to be nearly as much of a fit issue as I expected it to be before I even mocked it up. After an absolutely ridiculous number of times of mocking up the sleeve and making adjustments, this is where I ended. The top piece is the pattern as it comes from the book, and the bottom piece is my sleeve pattern. There's a couple of things, when you look at an extant garment, it was made for a person, right? And so their body measurements are going to be different from yours. But what I'm surprised at is how short the sleeve is from here to here. It's not short enough to be a 3/4 sleeve, and it's not long enough to be a full sleeve on me. I had to extend the sleeves out quite a bit. And then the other thing is these sleeves were not the same width, nor were they the same length from here to here. So I had to make those adjustments down here at the bottom. I did have to enlarge the sleeve, but I ended up having to take it down in through here to make it fit closer to my wrist. My pattern includes seam allowances that are not drawn on there. So the seam actually is going to be right here, right? So that's quite a bit of narrowing in this sleeve. And originally I had just extended it on the same, slope. It made it way too big down at the bottom. But I did have to make it bigger up at the top. But the biggest surprise to me was the sleeve head. Whoever wore this the first time is longer from here to here than I am. Again, we don't have seam allowances on here, so my seam allowance is actually going to be right about there compared to here. So that is, what, 1 1/4 inch, 1.5 inch difference in the length from elbow to shoulder. It took me so many mock-ups, and I think I finally figured it out. The other thing I had to adjust is where it was rotated to get the underarm seam up where it needs to be. That is something I have noticed before on 18th century gowns, is the inner seam that goes right up through here has to be rotated almost toward where your bust apex would be instead of being under your arm. So once I rotated it and trimmed off a bunch of stuff up at the top, then I was able to get the sleeve to fit, because otherwise this extra length and not being turned correctly, I was getting a lot of wrinkles up and through here, and it took me a lot of time to figure out why. So I won't bore you with all of the details. I mean, I've been showing some examples as I've been walking through here of video footage that I had, but I'm so tired of mocking this thing up that I really don't want to insert another sleeve. I figured out what I needed to do, and here's where I landed. It doesn't matter where you've deviated from the patterns of fashion pattern, as long as you have an excellent fit on your body. Before I get too far with the sleeves, I want to think about the cuff. And this is the cuff as written. It has sort of a curve here, and it gets a little wider on one end than on the other. I am not seeing how that's going to fit into my new sleeve shape. So here is the mock-up that I had, and you can see this is supposed to fit over the sleeve once you've sewn it up. My seam allowances aren't going to match, so if I line this one up on this seam allowance right here, it will not match the seam allowance. So I'd have to adjust this anyway. Yeah, they don't even match up. Thank you, Janet Arnold, but I think you got some things wrong, right? Which is fine. Nobody's perfect. And you're taking it off of clothes that you can't undo. Things may have shrunk, may have, distorted over time. So this is 3.5 inches. This one over here is right at 3. So there's a 1/2 inch difference from here to here, which means your cuff wouldn't line up when you put it on. And again, this curve doesn't make a bit of sense. So we're going to do away with that. Maybe this is my pattern piece then here. I will mock this up and then see how that sits on here. I like the scale of this cuff. Here's where that curve comes in. So I actually had this, I think, upside down, or else it was upside down as written. Oh, there's so many pieces to this, and it's such a puzzle to figure out what goes next. All right, here's an update since the last clip. And I have to make my usual disclaimer that this dress form is not the correct shape for 18th century. Anyway, I went ahead and added the black wool along the collar and along the lapels. I did this off camera. What I did was I took a pattern off of the pattern piece for the front here, and I did make a whole facing. I wish I had thought to do this while I was doing the lining. I could have saved myself a lot of hassle by adding this gray piece to this like green linen and sewing it all as one here, you know what I mean? And I could have gotten the gray piece in there and then just added this. But I'm actually not that sad about putting this extra piece of fabric all along the front, even though the pattern only called for this piece right here, because it feels like this needed the extra strength that comes from having another layer of fabric. I'm going to have buttonholes in here. It's going to attach to buttons over here. And I don't want those buttons to tear through. It felt like this lightweight wool suiting and the linen was kind of flimsy, you know? So I was regretting not putting in some interfacing or interlining or something like that. So now I can sew in those buttons and buttonholes, and I've got a little extra fabric to have them like bite into, you know what I mean? So hopefully I won't tear out any buttons anytime soon. But what I did here is I just folded over the raw edges and hand stitched all of this into place. The all gray was starting to get to me, and I was thinking that it needed something. And to me, this black wool lining here will look really good with a black wool petticoat that I'm going to make to go with this. Here's another thing I did. When I was patterning the collar, I couldn't get it to lay flat in the mock-up fabric. So I added some extra width, and it turns out that extra width was causing a ripple right along in here. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to like cut into the finished collar and try and re-sew it, well, you know, take out a dart or something like that. And I couldn't figure out really how I wanted to approach that. By the time I saw that it was a real problem, I had already stitched in the lining. So it would have been a lot of work to make a new collar, try to take out the old one, insert the new one, yada, yada, yada. So what I did was I played around with different ways to fix that, and this is what I ended up with, and I actually love it. It was kind of a happy accident. It also helps this stand up a little bit more because it was kind of collapsing on itself, and so this was a good solution. My next step is to insert the sleeves. Here are the cuffs that I've made to go with them. I've also done some experiments in embroidery to see if I can, I don't even know if you can see that, to see if I can maybe add some texture to some areas on this. So I'll have to figure out something that I can pull off with some kind of quality, being a novice. But maybe a little chain stitch detail right along here might be nice. Anyway, I'm thinking about that. So today is sleeve day, and hopefully some embroidered buttons, and we'll go from there. The sleeves are in. I did not have to take them back out. So I did a good job on making sure I kept everything just right. It looks good. I'm really happy. It's my first try on with the sleeves actually in, and the length is good. I will add the cuffs. And so even when adding the cuffs, it'll probably remain right about this long, which I think is fine. And here it is over the bum pad, a little bit of wrinkling right there, but I think once I get the rest of the outfit on and I can actually button it the way it wants to be buttoned, I'll be in really good shape on the fit. I do think that this collar has been a good move. The addition of the wool, it's giving it a lot more structure than it had before. I'm in the home stretch on this project and it feels really good. I've done a lot more of this project off camera than I would have liked, but while I was sitting in front of the TV last night, I did add some embroidered detail. I'm not a very good embroiderer, and it's not something I've done a lot of in my life, but I do like the way this is looking here. And I ended up making some button covers, and you know, they're imperfect, right? They're not great, but I think they're gonna do. So my goals for today are to assemble all of the covered buttons, and then I'm going to mark and make my buttonholes. And I've never, ever in my life sewn a buttonhole by hand. So I will practice a couple of times probably before I dive into this. But there should be 6 buttonholes and then 12 buttons. So the 6 that you button into and the other 6 on this side. The original jacket has an additional row of buttonholes here, but on the extant garment, they said that they didn't look like they had ever been used. So it had only ever been really button left over right. So I'm going to save myself a lot of time and only sew 6 buttonholes instead of 12. I only have an hour in my sewing room today, so I wanted to go ahead and quickly prepare the pieces to sew up the matching petticoat. I took my measurements off of another petticoat that I made that's going to fit over the false rump, and I've got 2 panels that were 41 inches long. But then it occurred to me I had enough of the gray wool to bring some of that into the skirt. So what I'm going to do is add a strip of the gray wool into the skirt panels toward the bottom to make like a stripe around the hem. That's going to then make my black panels too long, which is great because then I can cut off a piece of the bottom of each of the black panels and use that to fashion a waistband. Anyway, long story short, since I have an hour in my sewing room, I have torn my strips of gray. The gray fabric is a little more narrow than the black fabric, so I've got to piece the strips together, sew them onto the bottom of the black panels, and then assemble the skirt. What's interesting about this petticoat is that it was made with box pleats. And in Patterns of Fashion, they say that that was not common, or there's not very many examples, if any examples, of a box pleated pettiskirt versus just basic knife pleats. So I'm excited to try this method out. The skirt in the book is 144 inches wide. The limitations of my fabric mean I'm only working with 120 inches. So I'll do what I can when it comes to making those pleats. But it's black wool. You won't be able to see it even if I were to show you on camera. So I'll come back and I'll explain what I did. Okay, so an hour is exactly enough time to tear the fabric into the strips that I needed and to assemble the basic petticoat. So you can see now I have a nice gray stripe on my black wool petticoat. On the original there is a facing of linen. I'm out of linen, or at least out of linen that I'm willing to cut up into a 6-inch strip to face the skirt. So I'm going to just face it with the gray wool, and I think that'll be just fine. So anyway, that's good work for 1 hour. I have to pleat it obviously and put on the ties and finish it up. But you can get a lot done in an hour when you have your mind focused on the task. So that was pretty cool. I finished the petticoat and I'm in love. These pleats are amazing. They're kind of like double, even triple box pleats across the top of the petticoat, and they give such a nice shape to the skirt. You want all your fullness to be around in the back where you have the bum pad, right? So you do a larger center box pleat here on the front, but when you turn it around, you've got a lot more pleating in the back. I did install a wool waistband. That was really easy to put in. I just stitched it on the outside, folded it over to the inside, and then stitched it by hand. I have some twill tape ties. Surprisingly, this petticoat only took me maybe about 2 hours all told. And that was impressive for me. I don't usually sew that quickly, especially with historical costuming. I didn't use math. I just kind of followed the guide and adjusted where I needed to adjust, and it was done. I mean, the pleating was done in a matter of minutes. This fabric is a lint trap, so every little speck of fuzzy in this room is getting on this skirt. But you can see how pretty that gray stripe looks on the bottom, and I love the pleating at the top. So all that's left to do for this costume is to try it on for you and style it. While I show you some detail shots, I just want to tell you about a couple of things that were firsts for me on this project. One of the ways I approach historical sewing is as a learning process. So I'm trying to expand beyond the big 3 patterns and modern clothing and basic, fit. I want to learn how to go beyond that and to do some things that are a little more tailored, a little more professional looking, a little more customized to my body. That's not something that happens overnight. You kind of have to start with the big 3 patterns and work your way towards something like making this project. It was a fascinating process and I learned a lot. So the first thing I learned is how to scale a pattern up from a drawing to full size so that I can begin to then look at it and see how it compares to my body shape and my size. That's a first for me. I've never done that for a complete project like this jacket and petticoat. I've done it for pieces on previous videos, like I stole a cuff from here and I got inspiration from a skirting on a jacket there, but I've not done it for a complete item of clothing. And so this was a first for me. The second thing was sewing with wool. I've never actually sewn with wool before. I love it. I've decided that wool is a wonderful fabric to work with. It's actually really easy to steam and shape and ease into these tricky curves in a way that a woven cotton is not as forgiving, I guess. The gray wool is a very nice wool suiting. It's a good quality. The black wool is a little looser weave. It's not quite as expensive feeling, but it's what I had on hand. And I bought it for really cheap at a like $1 a pound place. You know, I'm using what I have, but I do love the way it looks and I love the way it was easy to work with. Third was doing hand sewn buttonholes. And I posted a post on Instagram about this. I made my first ever hand sewn buttonholes. Are they perfect? No way. Are they functional? Absolutely. And can I do better the next time I do it? Yes. So the whole point is to learn something new, and you can't be perfect when you come out of the gate the first time. It was equal parts terrifying and exciting to make those buttonholes. And I learned a lot, and I think the next time I make them, it's going to be great. But on this jacket, using the thread that I used, you really can't see them. So it doesn't matter that they're a little chunky, they're a little clumsy looking, but that's part of the learning process, right? So I've got to get better as I go, and this project is my start on making better hand sewn buttonholes. And then the last thing I did that was new to this project was I used some embroidery to create texture or visual interest on the project. I've done embroidery in the past where you have like a printed pillowcase and you follow the guidelines. This was my first time of kind of freehanding my embroidery. I didn't even mark a line on the garment. I just dove in and started sewing. I'm sure it's a little amateur looking compared to what some other people might do. But for me, making those little details on the buttons really elevates this piece from where it would have been with just the plain black collar and plain black buttons. So I'm really happy with my decision to add some interest with embroidery floss. And I do think, again, that's another thing that I will get better at as I go. Those are some things I learned that were a lot of fun for me, and I can carry them over into the next project. Anyway, thanks for joining me as I did this fun project from Patterns of Fashion, and also as I got back into the sewing room after a really long break. It's been refreshing for me to work on this project and to bring you along with me. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.